Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to today's Hangout session on the X1 family. My name is Cerise and I'm the Advocate Program Manager on forums.lenovo.com. With us today, we have Mr. Lee Highsmith, who is one of our competitive analysts, as well as two of our forum advocates, Nate Sabin, as well as Andrew Etherington, who are incidentally two of our fantastic moderators on the forums. Before we proceed, could we let Lee introduce himself and tell you more about what he does? Lee,
Sure.
over to you.
Thank you, Serene. So my name is Lee Highsmith. Kevin Beck and I are on the worldwide team in the product group, focused on competitive analysis and really focused most of our time on design and engineering and sort of forward-going strategy for ThinkPad and ThinkCentre especially.
Thanks, Lee. Over to you, Nate. Could you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'm Nate Sabin, as Serene said. I'm a forum advocate, one of the super moderators on the boards. In my day job, I'm an operations vice president for a small startup company here in Central Virginia, focused on diabetes research. But I'm also a long-term ThinkPad user. It goes back to 1998, I think, was my first with a 380 XD. Right now I'm using a Carbon, so I've seen the entire gamut of it.
Fantastic. What about you, Andrew?
So, yeah, my name's Andrew Etherington. Like Nate, I'm a super moderator on the Lenovo online support community. I've been a member of the community for 8 years. My first ThinkPad was a X20. I'm currently using an X1 Carbon, and my day life, I am an electronics engineer. I was in the semiconductor industry for 25 years, but now I'm basically a robot parts sales guy, looking for robots.
Cool. Thanks. Now, Lee, tell us all about the whole X1. I mean, how did it come about? I mean, the two gentlemen in this call today, they went to CES this year, and then basically I can tell you their tongues were rolling out of their mouths as they were sharing all the fantastic material that came out. But yeah, could you just tell us through about how the journey evolved and had come about for this product line?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, if you got the chance to see the X1 Pavilion at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, was we had kind of the history of ThinkPad and that thin and light experience. So it all kind of started with the ThinkPad 700C, and we have some great. If you go to the ThinkVision channel, there are some great clips of Naito-san talking about the evolution of some of those products and some of the other engineers. So maybe we can put a link there for you on that. But the idea was to really reinvent things and make them more mobile and take a very purposeful approach to design. And very quickly, you know, the ThinkPad 700 was, you know, small for a computer of its time and very well designed. But that freedom, you know, it was kind of funny to listen to Naito-san talk about how damaged those systems very quickly became, because for the first time people could really realistically take that computer and go somewhere and work out of their office environment. And that subjected PCs to things that we'd never really seen before. And that kind of became the basis for a lot of the things on both mobility and durability that have become, you know, the signature things for ThinkPad today. And obviously culminating in today's X1 product line. So, you know, we showed examples of, you know, the early X series models and the X300, which is still actually, by today's standards, a pretty thin and light laptop, even though it was released, I believe, in 2008. So, you know, we spent a lot of years thinking about how to make things smaller and thinner and lighter, but not giving away the durability. I mean, we see today the consumerization of IT. I mean, a lot of people, I talk to CIOs and IT managers all the time, and everybody's asking them for something thinner and cooler in their coffee shop. But at the same time, their, you know, job and challenges haven't changed. They're still required to give those end users something that lasts and can be secure and is just durable and has good usability. So that for us, the ultimate expression of that is the X1 product line. So several generations now, we've had the X1 and X1 Carbon, which is the thinnest expression of the ThinkPad product line. And this time it really took a family. So, I'm sure you're all aware by now, X1 Carbon at 2.6 pounds is the thinnest, lightest product for a clamshell in the X1 family. But the X1 Yoga to me is the star of the show in this generation. It's actually what I'm using to have the discussion tonight, and I just love it. And one of the questions we've gotten, I think was submitted here, was why didn't we do a touch model of X1 Carbon? And I think the answer in that really lies in some of the data we've seen for user preference. So, if you look at kind of, and it's, by the way, this study is a little less than a year old now, and when you asked corporate end users, what do you want? A clamshell, a 2-in-1 device like our X1 tablet, or a convertible like the X1 Yoga, you add the two non-traditional form factors up, and already almost a year ago, people were saying they wanted, the people were asking for a clamshell was actually just slightly lower than people were asking for those non-traditional form factors. So, doing an X1 with touch really felt like a kind of an island product. Because once you add touch, you're really using that system very differently in today's world with Windows 10 and all the tablet and multi-mode enabled things you can do. So having two products instead of one, really giving people that full experience with pen, with touch, a convertible experience, really meant that an X1 Carbon with a touchscreen was probably a low volume choice, and we really feel very strongly that Yoga hinge coupled with the touch experience and a pen especially is just really compelling. So, we sort of shot the gap, if you will, a little bit. We have an X1 Yoga, which is the touch model essentially, and an X1 Carbon, which does not have touch, which allowed us to get to that super thin 16.45 millimeters and 2.6 pounds of weight. So, that was kind of one of the first questions you guys asked I wanted to kind of touch on. And then on the other side, the other prominent member of the mobile family for X1 is, of course, the X1 tablet. So, this is a form factor that a lot of IT organizations are being asked by their users, something very tablet optimized, something that's very thin and light. But the challenge they have that you're seeing out in the market today has been a highly consumer-centric approach to those designs. So I've actually heard of companies, and not small ones, who have taken those consumer tablets in their enterprise and done pilots, and their service on the tablet, because they're not able to go in, they're not allowed to use depot service on corporate devices when they have security practices. So the technician comes in and lays a piece of paper on this PC tablet. There's an X on it that shows them where to drill through to destroy the hard drive, and they throw it away because they're not allowed to send it in with corporate data, and the thing is so glued together they're not able to get inside it to pull the SSD for people before they send it in for service. So one of the key design elements for us on X1 tablet was to make it just as thin, just as light. We're actually slightly lighter than the main competitor, but you only have to do, there's actually 3 screws here in the back, 2 screws on the bottom edge, and you can just pop the back off and service pull the hard drive or service it. Wireless radios are accessible. You can service the battery. A technician can. It's not really user serviceable, but this service is like a PC, and it was really great to watch. In fact, the CIO of one of the biggest companies I've heard with the drills came in and said, "Great, no more drills, right?" And our answer was, "Yes, no more drills."
It's interesting that you say. It's interesting that you say your personal choice is the Yoga in the new expanded lineup. I'm kind of lusting after that tablet, so I may have to take it from you.
Well, I love it. I guess for me it's one of those things. As there's swim lanes for people who are really lusting after the smallest, thinnest, lightest thing. I kind of value a bigger screen. But I tell you, there are a lot of people, especially once you add, the expansion module to X1 tablet with 15 hours of battery life, who find that to be a really compelling solution. And these expansion modules are kind of the other. So serviceability is one of the unique things. Durability, because this passes. I mean, one of the little nuances. It's not exactly sexy to talk about, but this passes all of the over 200 ThinkPad durability tests, 12 mil-spec methods or mil-spec methods and 20 procedures. But the other thing is the expansion, right? So this expansion module gives you docking, a full-size HDMI, and another USB port in addition to the 5 hours. You guys saw the projector module at CES, and we have the 3D camera, 3D imaging module as well. So that expandability is really unique.
We did see, you mentioned it, it's interesting. We spent a lot of time in the X1 lounge at CES. It's really
I remember.
It was a fun place. I did sneak in a couple of times, and I saw you and Kevin pretty much when it was a quiet time over there with that X1 tablet, working with that projector and just having a really good time with it. A different question kind of that I have, and Andrew and I talked about this at CES and then afterwards again a little bit. One thing that's really intriguing about the X1 family, especially with Carbon and Yoga, is the ability to do WiGig now, right? This whole WiGig with the WiGig dock. And one of the things that we've learned from looking at the hardware maintenance manual for the Carbon and the Yoga is that WiGig and wireless WAN are mutually exclusive.
That's correct.
Okay, and is there a reason for that? Was it a design issue, not enough room for antennas, something like that?
It's the latter, yeah. So it's an antenna thing. So obviously Wi-Fi is on everything, and if you look at the way the panels are constructed, it kind of goes up around the edges and to the top, and just sort of the amount of room and lanes we have. And today the way sort of the bus is set up really only allows either or. I mean, obviously we're not going to choose not to have Wi-Fi models.
Well, sure, yeah.
So we've heard a lot of that feedback, and we are certainly looking at it as we go forward, because there are a lot of companies that obviously value the 4G connectivity very highly. So
yeah, I know that Andrew used it extensively at CES.
Yeah, so I have LTE on my X1 Carbon that I use day to day now, but I was really excited about WiGig because I got to play with it a lot at CES, and it performs great. I've been so skeptical of wireless, and particularly with things like latency and problems connecting up to monitors and so on. And it was flawless. It was high speed, and it was great. And so in a way, I was a little bit disappointed to find out I couldn't have my cake and eat it. I couldn't have WiGig and the wireless WAN together. But, I probably that will come eventually. I hope so. Anyway, I hope you get that figured out. But one of the things that you did figure out that is amazing to me is the wireless WAN, which I've always thought was very difficult to do in a tablet, because in a convertible, because when it's in tablet mode, the keyboard is blocking the antenna, from the usual placement. And I mean, I think it's awesome that you've managed to do that. I mean, what can you tell us about how you actually managed to pull that off?
Well, let me actually can share my screen non-destructively here. Let me hop over to that chart. It actually, so if you're familiar with how we let me find the toolbox here. Screen sharing. There we go. So I'm going to share my screen here for just a moment. If you're familiar with how we construct the top cover, so on the left you see the top cover type material here that is allowing the wireless, both Wi-Fi and 3G, 4G radios to see the world. Because whether it's metal or carbon fiber, they block radio waves. So we actually, for many years, have put essentially a fiberglass window in the top covers of our PCs to maintain rigidity of the top as a single piece, but also allowed great wireless receptivity. So, as you said, when we were folding the PC around to the front, if you look to the right side of the screen, you can see that we've actually made the lip of the keyboard also out of a radio transparent plastic that is designed to still allow the radio waves, of course, to go through. So you see the the antenna there on the back, and then the radio transparent lip of the PC itself. So you have great wireless receptivity, but because we've had so many years of making that top cover radio transparent and strong, we were able to essentially replicate in strategy anyway the same kind of structure for the lip.
Okay, got you.
And that way, so we really kind of, that is Yokohama in a nutshell right there for me. It is, let me see if I can go out of, am I back on unsharing mode?
Yep.
Okay. So for me, that's Yokohama in a nutshell. They are not going to do what we've seen some guys do, which is when the PC folds up, it kind of leaves a gap here.
Mm-hmm.
Because for us, that means that you have a bad side from a hold perspective, and you only have on one edge where you're going to have a good hold usability, if you will. And Yokohama's approach to problems like that is engineer it. Don't compromise it. Apply engineering and all the, almost a quarter of a century of institutional knowledge that we have to try to solve problems like that just make it disappear for the user. I mean, you're not going to look, and I apologize, I don't have the, like I said, I'm presenting from my X1 Carbon tonight. But you're not going to look at that PC and think, oh, there's something different here at the front of the keyboard. It looks like a regular PC keyboard. It is going to, if you drop it, it's going to behave like you expect it to from a ThinkPad. And when you're in that tablet mode, you're going to get the same kind of receptivity you expect from a ThinkPad.
Yeah.
So that's it was one of my favorite stories to learn about when we went to Yokohama in August.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you've done a great job. The LTE is essential to me. And my next carbon is going to be an X1 Yoga, and I'm looking forward to the fact that that's going to work. And I'm looking forward to WiGig eventually.
Yep. I mean, there's a reason we waited on WiGig as far as, we'd seen it in some other platforms before, and in this generation, kind of all the things from a usability and design and support and other perspectives all kind of came together. So I agree with you. I think it's working well, and I had this, by the way, CES was my first time seeing it sort of in live, and especially working, we had a couple different of them sitting there, so to see that work with alacrity and no conflict, and as you said, no lag, was really kind of nice. I was really happy about that.
So one of the things that you mentioned was that that yoga obviously was one of the real stars of CES, and for anybody that got to go and saw the non-OLED and the OLED yoga side by side, it really was an amazing kind of a comparison to see firsthand. And so, I've said, I'm a Carbon user. I'm really intrigued by the tablet because it's kind of a unique device in the X1 family, more so even than the Yoga. ThinkPad Yogas have been around for several generations, just not X1 Yoga.
Sure.
But we're starting to get some questions about, when will OLED be available? The OLED Yoga, X1 Yoga. Second, and related to that, we had some discussions at CES where we were kind of hinted to about some of the new technology that went into actually bringing OLED to the Yoga to address some of the issues that people see with like burn-in, image retention. But we didn't get a whole lot of details. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how OLED is working in Yoga. What's the first, some of the new technology, and how people are liking it at least with the test units that people have.
So it's still kind of pretty early. General availability, I think the safe terminology is late spring. So we've seen some of the samples floating around there. Even within Lenovo, there are not lots of them floating around. So just before I go to the rest, I will say unless you're fully committed to OLED, don't get one, because it'll ruin you for every screen ever for the rest of your life.
Exactly right. And Andrew and I we drooled over it every time we were looking at it.
I had the opportunity to travel with it a little bit after CES, and I tell you, I was almost happy to give it back just because I knew it would be several months before I had one of my own. It is a gorgeous screen. It beggars anything in the marketplace today as far as screen technology. There are some what I'll call paper trade-offs. So, for example, X1 Yoga is rated for 10.5 or 11 hours, where X1 with the Yoga with the OLED screen is 8 or plus. Now that's kind of an equivalent Mobile Mark 14 type test, right? The one thing I will note on that is that OLED at dimmer screen brightness looks awfully good still. So I'm not sure if that's a one-to-one. Well, let me say it differently. That benchmarking was done with equivalent brightness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that I'm probably I have an OLED screen on my I put my phone somewhere on my Nexus 6, right, from Moto. I don't run it at full brightness because it
right.
It burns more battery and it doesn't look that much better. It's really good at medium brightness. So I think X1 Yoga with OLED will have a similar phenomenon. I think people will get very reasonable battery life out of it, and it looks terrific. Now, in terms of OLED, obviously you mentioned the screen burn-in issue, and that's something that it's one of the reasons why there is a separation. Is not that we've had problems so much as just as we've come in, we're being extremely careful to make sure that we're putting the right driver and engineering technology in there to avoid burn-in. So there are things where it will actually shift the pixels. We work very closely with our supplier on the firmware to avoid the burn-in for things like the well, actually, my Windows bar is on the left. So Windows bar at the bottom and things that are very consistent on the screen for long periods of time. So the discussion I've heard is that the driver technology, and it won't be visible to the user, but we've been able to modify the behavior essentially of the screen to not constantly have those pixels lit up and create the burn-in issue. I'm trying to figure out where I put my phone. So it's coming, and I'm super excited about it.
So what you're saying is that by default, those issues will be managed by the firmware and the hardware and software from Lenovo. But I did notice at CES that there was some management software. Was that more color calibration software?
Yeah, I mean,
there was something called the chameleon test that I went through, and I think I failed.
Yeah, I mean, because it's such a high gamut, it has the full color palette. Yeah, so I mean, anybody who's doing like video editing, I'm a photographer as a hobbyist. The color calibration and sort of behavior of the screen can be sort of optimized for things like that. So yeah, I mean, and I believe I haven't seen final software on that. I think what you saw at CES was probably the test mule, essentially. So you guys are familiar with our Lenovo Companion software. I think it'll be part of that.
Yeah, that's where it was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
All I know is you had to kind of drag us away from that one display model. It was just, you just had to you kept gravitating to it like a moth to a flame.
Yeah, I've been accused of being a little bit of a fanboy of OLED. But I'm looking forward to it with dread a little bit, just because I know that depending on how things work out, and there's certainly a premium for it. To me, premiums like that are a little bit like the ThinkPad keyboard. It gives back to you every day, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, a beautiful screen, a great keyboard experience. Those are things that just you're going to enjoy every time you touch the computer. So I personally think it's a very worthwhile premium. I think the battery life is probably not as big an impact in the real world as it will see on paper. I mean, we'll see how that plays out when we get production machines in hand. And it's hard to, I mean, I see the image of that frog. I know you guys saw it too. It's just such a vivid picture, right? So it'll be. I think OLED is going to be very popular because again, you look at a lot of our corporate customers are saying, give me something that my end users will love. Give me something that feels, more consumer inspired. And to me, OLED is a great example of that, and right. Offers a lot.
Yeah, there are we're seeing people starting to ask about it. We're 3.5 months out from CES basically, and they're like, where is it already? Come on already, where is it?
Yeah, I think we said late spring at CES though. It's like Christmas. You see that big box wrapped up under the tree kind of thing, if you celebrate Christmas. And it's hard to get your attention away from the big box. So. That's right. Everybody's waiting with bated breath for that, for sure.
Same thing about WiGig as well. We're seeing a couple of questions about that. I guess it's not shipping yet.
I had not heard that until I think yesterday, so I'm not sure if that is tied to availability of some of the ThinkPads, or I have not seen. I just heard about that myself. I think it was yesterday, so I'm not sure what the deal is with that. I had heard there was, it was just now kind of hitting the docks.
Okay, and can I ask one other question about something cool I saw at CES that I can't get my hands on yet, and it goes perfectly with my X1.
All right.
That's the 65-watt micro power adapter. Those things are great. They're so small.
Yeah, it's funny. Bitter is the wrong word. I mean, it's funny when you've done so many things for like an X1 Carbon or an X1 Yoga or an X1 tablet, and everybody goes rah rah about a tiny AC adapter, right? But no, I agree with you. I think it is a really cool product. I think anybody who's highly mobile will have the idea of take whatever that you get shipped in the box for the ThinkPads, plug that into the wall at your desk, and take one of these super tiny 65 watts on the road with you.
That's me.
Yeah, volume in the bag is something that's really hard to replace, and where, I mean, trade-off for me on thinness of a machine, I'll give back a millimeter to know that this thing is going to be really tough and last for the 1,001 days that I'm supposed to have it. But AC adapters are the most inefficient space in my bag. I hate them. I hate them. And so I was equally excited about the 65-watt adapter. And my understanding is it is supposed to be shipping sometime this month.
Excellent.
I had heard at CES that it was a little bit later schedule, but I was like you. I kind of hope to have it by now. But I think
how many of them walked away at CES?
Well, I think the better question would be how many successfully made it home.
Yeah.
I don't think there was any. I don't think there was any.
Yeah, well, I'll be buying 2 of them as soon as they're available. One for me and one for my wife, who she works on her X1, and it's her only computer. Unlike me, she doesn't have 6 computers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's so small you can stick it in a pocket.
Right.
I mean, that's just what's so much fun is you get great charge performance because it is a full 65 watts. And on an X1 you get rapid charge with that, and then of course the ability to just have it so small you can tuck it in the back pocket or front pocket and walk around with it, no bag.
So one thing that I'll confess that sadly I didn't spend enough time looking at CES was one additional member of the X1 family, and that's the ThinkCentre, the new ThinkCentre, the desktop. I really wish I had spent a little bit more time with it. I'm not a desktop user, but I could see myself using one of those just because of the cool factor. So could you tell us a little bit about the X1 ThinkCentre?
Sure. So it is definitely a worthy member of the ThinkPad. I'm sorry, the X1 family, I should say. Super thin. It is actually CNC machine carved for the chassis, which gives it great cooling and great rigidity as well. So the all-in-ones tend to get moved around more than a traditional desktop. So having that really rigid chassis means that the components aren't stressed. So it's not just for coolness, or I should say, it is for coolness in terms of temperature, but not so much coolness in terms of style. Did help us be very thin as well. My favorite thing about the X1, ThinkCentre X1 is the glass. That when you get one of those big all-in-ones, and if you're especially in an office environment where there's a lot of ambient light and multiple light sources, all the reflections can really make it a little neurotic, to look at, because you're seeing all those reflections on your screen subliminally at least. So the anti-glare screen on the ThinkCentre X1. It's not the first machine to have that, but where it does hit some firsts is how we treat the rest of the glass. So, as a corporate product and as a product that, as an all-in-one is going to get used in a lot of different ways, we didn't want to compromise the camera experience and the multi-array microphone experience because we wanted this screen with the etching for anti-glare. So they have actually very precisely polished that screen so that there is not an etched area over the webcam. And they drilled 2 holes in the front as opposed to locating the microphones on the top, which gives you a much better dual array microphone experience. So if you're going to use it for things like Skype for Business or any kind of Google Hangouts, things like that, having the dual array microphones on the front allows you to use noise cancellation much more effectively, because the fidelity of the array, its ability to discern my voice versus background noises is much better when those microphones are pointing forward. So precisely drilling that and precisely polishing that hole for the camera is difficult. It's actually very unique in the industry. There's no other all-in-one that has anything like that right now. But they made that design choice and the engineering and manufacturing know-how to get that done in order to provide that experience. So that same kind of thing we talk about of, don't compromise the experience, apply some engineering and do the right stuff up front. Gives you something like the ThinkCentre X1. Hinges are big on ThinkPads. The hinge that's in the back of that ThinkCentre is also really sophisticated. So it's actually spring-loaded and weighted. So it looks like a simple hinge, but it's actually not. There's actually it's tensioned in the hinge, so you can actually very easily move it with one finger out and back. And it's obviously tested for thousands and thousands of cycles of out and back, as we do with our ThinkPads. The other thing that I kind of thought was cool about it is the video on the back. The DisplayPort is the industry's first auto-sensing in-out. So if you want to use an external monitor, a second display, plug it in the back and go. But if you want to use it to have the all-in-one as a display itself and plug, if it senses an incoming signal, it'll actually automatically switch to input as opposed to output. So that saves us some real estate on the back and makes things a little easier on the user. And if you notice, look on the back of the next ThinkCentre X1 that you see, all of the ports are vertically oriented except the video. So when you're feeling around the back trying to figure out which of those ports you're supposed to plug your DisplayPort in, it's going to be the only horizontally oriented port.
Okay.
So a little that's those little touches of design that I think are great.
Yeah, I didn't realize that the DisplayPort was bidirectional in that way, because I have a couple of all-in-ones and I always seem to end up using them both ways as monitors for my laptops and as all-in-ones. So that's awesome. One tiny design feature on the ThinkCentre X1 that I really liked was the privacy lock for the camera. It's just mechanical. It's just a slider that goes across the front of that, and that may sound funny, but let me tell you, my wife doesn't like cameras on her computer. She has duct tape over hers.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I've seen people post-it notes. Some people physically put glue on top of, just them essentially manually. So we've been doing that on our all-in-ones for years. There are a lot of countries in the world that have very strict privacy laws, and we want, very frankly, the idea that on something that you don't have as much physical control over the orientation of it as you do. Like I think that I can close my lid or turn it around or whatever. It's harder to do that with a desktop. So that physical camera display is something we've been doing for a number of years and have gotten a lot of good feedback for it. So it's something I think you'll continue to see for some time.
It's a cool new family. I was really intrigued to see the expansion of X1 at CES. I've been using X computers for a while, and with X1 Carbon being in its 3rd generation and now 4th, and then seeing how how there's a bunch of new cousins in the family. So it was really interesting to see that expansion. And I'm glad to see X1, expanding just beyond the clamshell.
Yeah, I think it's us answering the bell for what we're hearing from customers. I can't tell you how many people have said, it goes back to what I said earlier, give us something our users love. And, I think if you look at the totality of the family and not just X1, to be honest with you, actually I have to look very carefully. This is the previous generation X1, right, the 2015, but then something that I've heard a lot about that's not a family member of the X1 is the T50S, right? So, now you've got a T that feels awfully like an X1 Carbon that still has docking, has a full-size Ethernet, and something that people can very affordably deploy on a broad basis, that's something that a lot of people are excited about as well. So X1 family, I would almost call the T460S an X1 Junior because it just has so much in the way of features and still at a very affordable price. So, January was really exciting. We did a lot of revision, and all of it comes back from our customers telling us what they want to see. So I don't think X1, it was almost impossible to do one product as an X1. You can't do that and say you're listening to your customers well.
Yep, it was good.
So you reminded me when you mentioned about the T460S still docking. So for the new X1 Carbon and the Yoga, you have the OneLink Plus dock.
Yep.
And I was curious. It's got a different connector from the previous OneLink Pro, which is what I have for my 2015 Carbon here. And I was wondered what the changes were, why that change happened, and what the idea is.
I would say there were kind of two primary drivers, and it comes to things like docking and connectors in general, things like power connectors. The only people who hate those transitions more than the customers is us. We don't do it trivially. We certainly take a lot of thought about it. So the two big drivers were the thickness of the connector. So as I'm sure you're aware, the previous OneLink was oriented toward the, essentially the same dimensions as our power plug, just with extensions for native DisplayPort and native USB 3. But the big change that came along was just the requirements for thinness. So if you look at the mechanical, this, especially across the width that we're talking here, that's a lot of space to devote to a mechanical to make it strong and as rigid as we want, and non-susceptible to things like getting bent. So we needed the thinness, and the other thing that really drove the change, I think, was the first thing that came along was the much more quickly emerging desire for 4K screens. Mm-hmm. So the number of lanes that were included into the original OneLink did not have 4K capability, because obviously OneLink design is a number of years old now.
Right.
So we updated OneLink Plus to be able to carry a 4K full 4K signal.
Okay.
Those are the two big ones, and
yeah,
like I said,
makes
thin
sense.
design and trying to make
like
sure
you say, it's always one of those painful moments. I think I have 4 OneLink Pros around here somewhere.
Yeah, and so I mean, by the way, what you'll notice is that we really have kind of, well, two things. Now docking options are pretty broad. Wireless WiGig docking, wired docking WiGig, so you can do OneLink Plus on X1 tablet with the expansion modules I mentioned, available on X1 Carbon, X1 Yoga, and then on the rest of the family, the same docking connector we've had for a number of years. I'm trying to find it. It's funny, I can't pick up T460S and X1 previous generation without figuring out. I got to look at the docking connector to figure it out. So that's the same docking connector we've been using for a number of years. So the investment protection, essentially, that our customers expect from us on their current docking solutions is there.
Yeah,
we'll
so it's
the
same as this X240 one then.
Indeed, and
okay.
I mean, it goes back to, golly, T430 or 420. I forget when the transition was. So it's been a number of years now for us on that connector.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic discussion. I love it when people are really passionate about stuff and then they share and share and share. Do you have any more questions for Lee, Nate, or Andrew?
I think I asked most of what I had.
Well, I could ask one last question, and that was the transition from the swiping fingerprint reader to the hold your finger on it fingerprint reader. And whether there's why was that transition made?
A lot of reasons. I mean, there were some. Wow, that's a long question. So I think the net boiled down to two primary things. Just sort of the technology, the industry are continually evolving. But I think the biggest single one in terms of suppliers and things like that. So, for example, several years ago, one of our big consumer competitors bought one of the big one of the big fingerprint suppliers in the industry. But beyond that, the usability that we've gotten and feedback on over a number of years on swipe sensors has been that not everybody can successfully. They don't like the usability. They feel like they're picking at their machine, they're pawing at it, and not everybody. People who have small fingers seem to struggle to register their fingerprints. So, the press sensor technology is very robust against things like spoofing. So it doesn't has an oleophobic coating, so it doesn't have a persistent fingerprint. So you're not going to be able to lift the fingerprint. Still meets all the certifications that we are looking for on the security side, and it's extremely easy to use. So actually, my son has a newer ThinkPad up in his room, and he's able to register his finger where he wasn't able to before because he has just a small finger. So I mean, we've shipped fingerprint significantly. I mean, a multiple of any OEM in the industry. So it's something we're very committed to and fairly passionate about from a security perspective, of course. But the usability is kind of what enables that and unlocks it for everybody. So I think the press sensors will yield the security and the convenience people want as well. So I think that's, with ease of use comes greater adoption.
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to trying one.
Oh, you'll like it.
Yes.
I thought, I have to admit, as one of the early users of the swipe, I thought it would be a transition I would have to get used to. I was used to it right away. It really is just a much more comfortable design.
Yep.
Great.
Cool. Great. Thanks for all that, Lee.
My pleasure. Good talking to you guys.
Okay, for questions about the changes in designs and stuff that you want seen in our next iteration of the product line, please feel free to jump into our boards, our change feature board on forums.lenovo.com and leave your comments there. Lee and the rest will, of course, get this feedback, and we are listening to you all the time, and we'll try to incorporate these changes as much as possible. And also, if you want to find out about when, for example, the OLED screen is available in your country, right, when the X1 Yoga is available, please go to your respective country websites. Basically, just key in www.lenovo.com, and you can actually just get the latest products there according to your country. So thanks, gentlemen, for staying on above and beyond the time allocated. I'm very, very appreciative that you took the time out to basically share your ideas and to share your experience about the product. So thanks again. For you guys watching this, hope you enjoyed the session. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to pop by our forums and share your comments there. Right. That's it for now. That's it for today. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks,
My pleasure.
Thanks.
See you, Nate.
Thanks.